And we're live and no intro. Awesome. Welcome,
Yeah,
man.
we can learn.
We can indeed. And before we get too far, special shout out to Revyz for making this possible. Thank you so much, Revyz. Make sure you are backing up your Jira, and if you're not, then make sure you check out that link in the description and get started with Revyz.
Yep.
All right, Rodney, we're going to continue down our journey. I was looking at the module because I'm on a different computer today, and we're almost done. We're almost done. So let's see if we can power through this one and get there.
All
All right,
right. Sounds
folks.
like a plan.
We're gonna do a little bit of inception on my screens. I am on a not only am I traveling, but I'm on a different laptop because I wanted to travel light and don't have a second monitor. So here we go. Okay, so yes, Tuesday we wrapped up the uh, what are permissions in Jira. So we're just gonna continue exploring roles. And for some reason that went away. Okay. So by the end of this lesson, you're going to be able to explain what task viewers, members, and project admins can perform. So how can you access a Jira project? So there's roles that are going to control basically who can or can't access a project. Now, what's interesting here, Atlassian is not calling this out, and I think they should. I think this is a miss. These particular roles that you see here of administrator, members, and viewers, these are for team managed projects. This is not applicable to company managed projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to keep that in mind that if you're used to being an admin, especially a data center admin, and you move into the cloud and you're like, what's this members and viewers? They don't exist in your company managed projects, only in your team.
Atlassian does this a lot. And here's our first tangent of the show.
2 minutes in.
Yeah, where they'll name dissimilar things, similar names. We think project roles on company managed project, it means something else entirely similar, but something else entirely to what it means on a team managed project.
You know, pulling on that thread a little bit more on what you just said, and notice that it says administrators and there's an administrator. There's a singular and a plural version, and they both mean very different things.
Mm-hmm.
So pay attention to those details, folks. Like one character can mess you up big time. All right. So in team managed projects, there's 3 types of roles. There's going to be an administrator, a member, and a viewer. So what do they do? So the administrator is pretty self-explanatory because they're going to be basically the same in company and team with one caveat. Administrators of a team managed project can do a lot versus in company, they really can't. So the administrators are going to be able to assign users to project roles, edit project details like the name, description. So this is all stuff that's overlap between company and team. But once you get to configuring boards and layouts, like I think there's still a lot of overlap, but be careful. Assume that you can't. And in team managed projects, the administrator role can make all project configurations, right? So you can do workflows, add issue types, add fields, and whatnot. Now the members are able to create work items, they're able to edit, and they're able to transition. So this is basically, you wouldn't want to, if you don't want somebody to be able to change the name of your project or add fields or anything like that, don't make them an administrator. You're going to want to make them a member. Okay. And then this last one, Ronnie, I think this one's a very interesting one. This is a very interesting play that Atlassian has. There's a viewers. And so the viewers one here basically is like read only. They can't edit. We don't have this in company managed projects. Like you have to be creative to make a read only.
But I usually do this. Usually in my company managed projects, when I'm setting up for teams, I'll have essentially a viewer's role that allows people to see into the project, but not interfere with the team's processes.
Yeah, but something you have to create. It's not out of the box. Versus in team managed, we get it out of the box. So just keep that in mind.
If you do want to steal that from me, you have my blessing.
Have your lawyers talk to our lawyers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind, folks. Like it's easy to say, oh, there's no view only in Jira when you're so heavy on the company side. But know that on the test, right, especially if you've never gone to team managed, this could be one of those curveballs because unless you're in team managed projects to appreciate the fact that you have a real role that is really read only, then you're gonna miss that question. Assuming there's a question on on something like that.
I would be surprised if there wasn't.
Yeah. So team managed project admins and Jira admins can also create custom roles. So this is an interesting one. This is not something I typically do in team managed projects, but do know that you can create these very, very specific team roles, and they're interesting because you can actually, well, actually, let's see if they give us an example. No, they don't. So let's jump into Jira here real quick, and I'm gonna try not to give us all a seizure, but uh-oh. This is what happens when I'm not at home. Bear with me, folks. Uh-oh. All right, Rodney, I need to stop sharing for 1 second.
All right.
I need to
I've
log
got to
in.
go take care of something off screen real quick, so I'll be right back.
Oh, great. So let's just cue in elevator music, without getting a copyright strike. All right, folks, I am just simply logging on. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I am not in my natural element. I'm in a hotel, and I don't know how to type in and put my password in at the same time. And now I got to get a verification code. So bear with me while I get a verification code. Oh, security, right? And then Ronnie apparently, during the most critical time, decides he needs to take an off-screen
I'm
call
back.
or something. Oh, he's back. He's back. All right.
No. One of the cats decided now was time to start howling, so I had to go shut the door.
Oh, cats. All right. We're in Jira. Let me zoom in a little bit. All right. So here's what we're talking about. So in a team managed project, because this is weird. I wanted to bring this up because in company managed projects, you create roles over here. So you can come to the gear, you can come to system, and there's a project role section that allows you to create roles, as many roles as you want. You can create like 1,000 roles, but they don't do anything. They're completely useless. I'm gonna put they're completely useless in air quotes if all you do is create a role, because again, it doesn't do anything. You're just adding stuff to Jira. Okay. But once you create these extra roles like developer, product owner, scrum master, right? Once you create them in your company managed projects, right? So I'm going to go into a company managed project, into the settings of a company managed project, to the people section of a company managed project. And once you're in here, there is now in your roles all the roles that you created. And so you can query by them here. And when you add somebody, you can give them those roles. Now, I'm obviously on the free version, so I'm going to have to switch over, right? But trust me when I tell you, those extra roles that I was telling you about, they're in here. They're at the top. I just can't do anything because I'm in the free version of Jira. But even then, right, if I were to put somebody in the developer role here, it doesn't do anything either, because it's not until you put those roles in your permission scheme that magical things start to happen. So you would have to add like your role here, right? So I could actually, oops, not permission helper. I could do this where I can edit the permissions, and apparently not on the free version. Okay, Ronnie, we need to switch over to a different Jira.
We do.
Here we go. No, that's 24. Where's 25? Oh boy.
Did you just pass it?
Yeah, I'm good. Okay. So let's actually walk through the steps so now I can do it. So if you were to do roles we're going to do both. We're going to do team and company. But I'm going to do company first because it's more involved. So in the company one, you go to project roles, and you can come over here and create like a developer role. Awesome. We have a new role. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything at all. Nothing meaningful yet, right? We can go into a project, again, a company managed project. Notice it says company down here. I can go to the project settings. I can go to the people section. And in here, I can now add somebody. So we have, what do we have? Alana's my favorite. Who's your favorite fake employee? You don't play with it enough in the.
I don't play with the fake employees enough. Yeah.
Yeah, there's enough. There's a lot of fake employees in our Atlassian 1 instances. But anyways, so I picked Alana, who's again my fake employee, And you'll notice that that role that I just created is here. And so I can add Alana as a developer. And I see this happen so many times because what typically happens is there's a huge disconnect between like the Jira admin that created those extra roles and then what the project admin sees here, because they're like, oh, I have a developer. Awesome. They're just going to be a developer, right? It makes sense. My Alana is my coder. She's now my developer. Awesome. Everything makes sense, right? Except this doesn't actually do anything. Not yet. You have to go to the permissions, and in your permissions, you need to then embed and you need to weave in that role. So for example, here under browse project, I can now go to the role and give like the developer role that, and now my developers can browse and see this project. But it's a multi-step process to make the roles work correctly.
But this is what makes project roles so powerful, because now you could share this permission scheme between multiple projects, but still have individual project defined access because the projects are defining the roles.
Right. And I would highly recommend you remove this any logged in user if you're going to go down this route.
Obviously.
Okay.
But
so that's how we do it in team. Sorry, company. Anything else you want to add, Rodney?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
The other Rodney Estrada has a question here, but I think after we talk about team managed projects, we could properly address this question.
All right, cool. Because I'm like, I can't see, so I'm flying blind a little bit. All right, so let's jump into a team managed software project. Well, actually, I don't have one, so let's just do a business one. But in these business ones, basically the same thing. Under Access, you're gonna have those three roles. Now, these are the three that we were just reviewing. Where these are, notice that member and viewer do not, I repeat, member and viewer do not exist over here under the global roles. You'll notice that they're not there. Okay, so that should be like your key indicator, like something's wrong, something's different. Okay, so these roles, they behave very similarly, right? They're in the same part of the UI, but they do behave very, very differently. So we have our member and our viewers here. And so Atlassian, for team managed projects, has this manage roles button up here where you can basically leverage these three roles. And by the way, if you wanted to know in more detail what these roles do, you can click on the role itself and then it'll tell you a bunch of checkboxes like what it can or can't do. So these are the default ones. But when you create a new role, then you get to hit the checkbox. So if you were to create a developer role here, it's like a 2-for-1 special in team managed project, because not only are you creating a new role, which by the way is unique to this team. So if you're gonna, if you're gonna have 20 team managed projects and you want your developer role in there, you have to go 20 times, and this is why we don't like team managed projects. But it gives you that flexibility, and then you just check the checkboxes. What do you want your developer role to do? And you just go through all the checkboxes here and pick the ones you like, and don't select the ones you don't like. And once you're done, then that new role exists, and then it's just part of your dropdown, and now you can give Alana that developer role. So hopefully that clarifies things. Rodney, do we want to look at that question?
Yep. So Rodney Estrada asked, I forgot, if a role's permissions are edited in a project, is the role changed for other projects? As for custom roles, basically like a developer or something. And as Alex just said, for custom roles, on a team managed project, no, they're isolated to the project they're created in. That's the whole point of a team managed project, is configurations are absolutely isolated. Company managed project, it gets a little more nuanced.
That one, honestly, it depends on your permission scheme.
Yeah, it depends on your permission scheme. If you edit the role itself, you change developer to developer with an E at the end for whatever reason, or change developer to Imagineer, or whatever you want to do, that is a global change, and everyone will see that. If you, but Jira should handle all the permission schemes and all that and make that change internally. If you're sharing permission schemes that call out specific roles and you edit that permission scheme, every project that's shared with is going to see those changes.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, let's look at an example. So Haru is a project admin for a company managed software project. Key words here, folks: project admin, company managed. Those when you read project admin and company manage, you should have one view of the world of Jira. And when you hear project admin and team manage, you should have a completely different view of Jira's world because the behaviors are very different. So
Correct.
again, when you're reading those questions in the exam, pay attention to what they're telling you with respect to team or company or Jira admin, project admin, because again, whatever, those can be mixed in very different ways and get very different results. So 2 of her senior team members create most of the work in her project. They also manage the work log. Haru wants to give these senior teammates the ability to delete work items. The administrator role has the ability to delete work items, but would give these teammates too much access to configure the project. The members and viewer roles can't delete work items. What should Haru do? So Haru should create a custom role that has all the permissions associated with the member's role, but also has the work item delete permission. Because Haru is a company managed, but because Haru has a company managed project, only Jira admins can create roles. Haru asks Jira admin to create a new role called work manager, assign the appropriate permissions to the role. You know what? This is like so much more nuanced.
I'm just, again, me and Alex, as Jira admins, we go, oh, we just do this.
No, you can't do this though. Like what Atlassian is describing here is not something you can do.
You can make a new role.
You can't. No, you can create a new role, but there's no member role in a company managed project.
We're assuming because of this is some custom role they already have because that was set out in the scenario. That was my thought.
No, remember, Haru is a project admin for a company managed software project.
Again, you're thinking a entirely vanilla out of the box configuration. I'm assuming because they mentioned something that was not out of the box. This is something they custom configured.
But they're assuming that the member role is existing for company managed, which it doesn't exist unless you go and create it.
And I'm assuming they went in and created it.
But why would Atlassian, like, why would anybody go and mimic a team managed architecture?
Because some people really want simplicity.
No, I don't think so. also, these roles here. Oops, click in the wrong place.
When I think they made a mistake in the question design. I just don't think the mistake really impacts anything, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, you have to assume a few things, which is the dangerous part here. I don't like assuming things when you're walking into a test, right? But here's where, like, these all don't just, like, they look the same, but they don't all translate exactly the same, right? Like you sometimes have to read between the lines on some of these, but I mean, these are all pretty much the same that I'm seeing. But you can't assume that team managed permissions and company managed permission schemes are going to be the same. I think there's more company managed levers that we can pull, but the members and viewers do not exist in company managed projects. So to just simply say, "Whoa, copy the members permissions and add this one," doesn't work that way. So not a good one. Okay. On to the question. So Gina has the administrator role for the Delta project. What does this role make Gina? She's a project admin for the Delta project. She is not for all the projects in the site. She is not a Jira admin, and she is not a site admin. That was the first one.
I'd agree.
Mehmet is a team managed project admin. He isn't a Jira admin. He wants to create a new role called developers in his project. True or false? He can create the new role. Absolutely true. Yay. Next lesson. All right.
Team managed project gives you all the power as a project admin, but also it gives you all the ability to screw things up.
Because it's too easy to screw things up. Way, way too easy to screw things up. All right, let's talk about adding users to a Jira project. By the end of this lesson, you're going to be able to assign project roles. You know what's really interesting, though, that they didn't cover company manager at all in that last section. And even though we were being asked questions for company managed, but the question was wrong. We should talk with Joanna about that one.
Yeah.
All right. So how do we add users to project roles? So we already showed you how the roles work, right? So it's like a chicken and egg situation. So the one thing you want to know is you can't like jump into Jira and add a user to a role because the role needs to exist. And so you have to do the previous section, which is creating either understanding the existing roles or creating new roles to make this all work. Okay. But once the roles exist, then we can move on to the next step, which is putting people into those roles. And so when you're adding somebody, like we did to Alana, right, you need to give them a role. And then whatever your permission scheme or in Team Manage, whatever checkboxes you checked for that role, that's what they can do in that project. And so they're slightly different. So in Team Manage projects, to add users to the role, you're actually just gonna walk right through this. Okay. So in a Team Manage project, you're going to go into your. Did you see this, Ronnie? They updated this already for the new UI.
Yep.
So in Team Managed projects, you just need to go to Access, and then you're gonna go to Add People, and you're gonna put somebody in your team's name. So let me see if I have any B's, C's, D's, E's, F's. Oh boy, I gotta have somebody. Here we go. No. G's. Where are my fake employees at? Okay, D. Back to D. Mitch. We're gonna add Mitch. All right. You pick Mitch's name. You can also invite people. This is where I would caution you. So Atlassian likes money. Shouldn't surprise you. But one thing you should know is that you do have the ability to add like Bob at kingbob.com. And when you hit enter, Bob at King Bob is actually going to get an email invite, right, Ronnie?
Yep.
And the interesting thing is now this is where your ACP-620 rules are going to come into play, because if you have a rule that has your Jira open to anybody, which is possible, because Atlassian actually likes that, because the moment I invite Bob at kingbob.com, I'm on the hook for paying for his license. Again, there's some nuances, but Jira or Atlassian makes it easy so that if you actually invite Bob at kingbob.com, it is very plausible that you just bought a new license for King Bob. And again, depending on your settings, those invites are going to go straight through, and licenses will be granted to people. Even if Bob never accepts the invite, you're on the hook. And so if you're a site admin, if you're an org admin, if you're a Jira admin, go back and review your settings, because any user is going to be able to do this kind of invite people, right? And if you don't lock things down, your Atlassian bill is going to balloon real quickly, because people are just going to go rogue. And well, I don't know that they're going rogue per se. I think
You allowed them to do it as the org
Yeah.
admin.
Right. I'm like, there's a nuance that you allowed it, right? So if you allowed it and they can do it, I don't know that's necessarily, I don't think that there's malicious intent sometimes here. But yeah, so be careful, folks. Like, know that in here, if you don't set up your other Jira settings correctly, this is an easy way to like grow your Atlassian build to an unmanageable amount. Okay. So again, it doesn't have to be a user. The key point here is that these users that show up do not have to be users that are already licensed in your Jira. They can literally be anybody. And depending on your Jira admins or your Atlassian settings, that can either be a good thing or a bad thing. All right. So once your users do pick a name, though, again, whether it's an existing employee or somebody else, they then pick the role. And this is where you would have custom roles, and you give them whether they're a member, a viewer, or something custom. Easy. Then you just click it. On the company managed one, I don't understand why they say it's a different thing. It's the exact same thing. The only difference, the only caveat is that instead of this saying access on company managed projects, it's called people instead of access. But the behavior is exactly the same. You still go to add people, you find Mitch, right? And then you give them the role. The only difference is that your roles are going to be different. See, Ronnie, how there is no members or viewers role here?
I'm saying, I'm not arguing the fact that it's not in a vanilla configuration. I'm arguing the fact that you could create it, and I'm assuming they did.
Yeah.
I'm also not disagreeing that you shouldn't have to assume on the exams, but I don't think this one's outside the range of possibility because people create custom roles all the time.
But I don't know how much I agree that they're creating that member and viewer role. I'm not disagreeing. People create custom roles all the time, but I don't know how many times they're going to copy what team managed projects are doing. All right. Off of that soapbox. So for both team managed and company managed projects, you can create new project roles. However, for company managed projects, only Jira admins can create it through the Jira administration settings. And team managed projects, anybody can do it. So we've already talked about this. So I don't think we need to talk about it anymore, but you basically just create a new role. And in the company one I showed you, right, you got to go to system, you got to go to project roles, and then add the role there. Which again, I don't know, is this the same underneath? Yeah. The key point though is you can create the new roles, but they're very ineffective. You have to, in both team and company manage, you have to then follow through and select some checkboxes or modify your permission scheme. Admins create custom roles to either restrict permissions or to enable additional permissions for a specific set of users. For example, certain members on the rover team need to be able to delete work items, which normally only administrators can do. The team does not want to grant full administrator permissions to these team members. They only need to. So here's how to do it, right? In a team manage, you create a custom role called work managers that only gives them the ability to delete. Then you add the users to that role. In company, you create a role, work managers, you create a new permission scheme, you assign the work item delete permission to that custom role, and you associate the development permission scheme to the project. Then your project admin can add a user. I like how they just did this so simple, Ronnie. Like this is, I would never follow these steps. Do you know why?
Several points where I would deviate, but the first one would be I wouldn't necessarily create a new permission scheme because I'd probably already have something in place that just needs to be modified.
Bingo. And then if you do go down the route of creating a new permission scheme, let me show you what happens, because Atlassian, again, these are very misleading. I'm actually quite surprised Atlassian does this, but I get it. I get why they did it, because Atlassian, that are trainers or folks that are doing this, like Jira is very nuanced. There's the devil's in the details when it comes to Jira, and you have to find the right balance of like, how do we teach new folks versus how do we do it correctly? And so if you were to just create a new permission scheme, okay, if you were to click this add permission scheme and call this like a brand new permission scheme, and I click add, there's a fundamental flaw with this procedure. Check this out. Okay, I'm gonna go into it. Okay, this is a brand new permission scheme, and according to their instructions, right, create a custom role. Let's just assume, let's swap out developers or work managers for developer. Remember I made that developer one? I made a new scheme, and then it says assign the work item delete permission to that custom role. So they're just basically saying, come down here to work item delete issues here, update, go to that role, give that developer, right? That is literally, if you're following the instructions to the team, this is what you've done, right? And then they proceed to say, associate the scheme that I just made to the project, right? But there's a huge problem. Anybody in the chat want to take a guess what the problem is? Ronnie, help me out. Is anybody typing in the chat?
I mean, I could type it into chat, or I could just say it. There are no permissions yet.
There's no permissions to
else
anything else.
Assigned.
Yeah, well, there's no permissions to anything else, right? So if you do what the instructions just said, you basically just locked everybody out of Jira. And so you don't do what Atlassian says here, because this would be bad. Do not follow these steps.
Typically, when I'm creating a new project scheme, I'm not creating a new project scheme outright. I am copying an existing project scheme to give myself a starting point. And I think that's what they meant, but as we've already pointed out a few places, everything's not exactly right here with the Amendment update.
And you just can't assume these things, folks, because you'll get into a lot of trouble, right? Like if you were to but I'm just putting my hat on, Ronnie, of like a brand new Jira admin. and they're reading those instructions to the T, they're gonna screw themselves over pretty badly.
At which point they really need to go to either the JiraGuide.com or ApeTech tech tutorials on YouTube and look up how to properly do it.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap up this section here. So Jayesh is a project administrator for a team managed project. He needs to add new members, Sarah, and to the project. Sarah's role will involve adding and editing work. Which role should Jayesh add Sarah to? So these are pretty simple because you do need to memorize what the viewer can do, what the member can do, and what the administrator can do. If you're not in team managed projects a lot, you might need to refresh your memory, but pretty sure this is member. Because viewer can only view. They literally cannot edit anything. All right, Zaya is a project admin for a team's company managed project. This is not, this right here, Rodney. Team's company. That's two words that shouldn't be that closely together, right?
I mean, no, but I think that's the point. Are you really reading the question? This is why we say in our first and last episodes, read the entire question carefully.
Very carefully. Okay.
Because the next one will be company's team managed project.
All right. So again, we're talking about a company managed project. So that again should put you in a different state of mind. And Zaya is a project admin. She would like to give selected team members the ability to add watchers to a work item, but she does not want to make them administrators. True or false? Zaya can create a custom add watchers role that allows users to add watchers to a work item and assign her selected team member to that role. This one's a tricky one, Ronnie, because this one does require you to assume. By all technicalities, this is true. A custom add watchers role can be created, and users can be added to that role and be able to do that. The problem is Zaya doesn't have that permission, making this one false. But it would be true if you assume that Zaya talked to her Jira admin, who then added the role, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's see what Atlassian thinks, because both of these questions can be true in my opinion. All right. And this is exactly why. Thank you. And this is exactly why you don't make assumptions. Assumptions will get you in trouble. All right. On to the next one. And Rodney, we can finish this one up. I think we call it because I got a plane to catch.
Yep. So
and
let's see how many tangents we go on in this process.
5-minute section. Ronnie's going to make this one a 30-minute section. Okay, so configuring permissions for a team managed project. So by the end of this one, you're going to be able to define team managed project permissions, control access to the project, and configure work item. I feel like this should have been titled company managed. Right, so you can grant permissions to users in team managed projects. So in team managed projects, roles control how users interact with the project. Project admins can grant custom roles, different permissions to accommodate their project needs. For example, if you want external consultants to have more permissions than the default view role, you can create a new consultant role and grant it additional permissions like work items. So I mean, this is all for the same thing as the last section, so I don't think there's anything new here. Here we go. I did want to talk about this, Ronnie. I think this next part here is very, very critical. So far, we've been talking about the roles, right? The roles control like what can you do. But when you create a new team managed project, you're also confronted with an option, a decision that you will have to make. And that is, you need to determine, are you going to make the project private, limited, or open? And this decision does not exist in company managed projects as easy. You can definitely do something very similar, but you have to really, get creative with your permission scheme. And so this is one aspect that I really like about team managed projects, because they kind of broke out the complexity of how to do permissions and access. Versus in company managed projects, your permissions and your access are very intertwined. Would you agree or disagree?
Absolutely agree.
Okay. So again, I wish this existed in company managed projects, but essentially, if you make your project private for a team managed project, then only Jira admins and users with the roles in your project can search, view, or comment. Like basically, if it's private, you have to explicitly add somebody to that project. And so here's how this plays out over here. So in this team managed project over here, we have our access and we have open. And so you can do private, limited, or anyone. And I think this view gives you better. But if you set it to private, right, then that means somebody has to have their name here, because if their name is not in this list, they don't get access to Jira or to that project. So private is really good to make sure your project is private, as the name implies, which again, this doesn't exist in company managed projects as easily. Then we have limited. Limited is an interesting one. So limited is, if you choose the limited, anyone can access your project. They can search any issues in there, and they can comment on stuff. But only people with the role of like member or administrator can actually edit and create new things. So there's a nuance here, right? Because this one's interesting. This one's like, you can have like a stakeholder. So the project actually is exposed. So that means anybody with the Jira license can see a limited project. They can go into that project. They can view all the work in that project. They can even comment on it, but they can't edit it. So they're not going to be able to like change the title or something like that. So this is an interesting one. Again, it doesn't really exist in company managed projects. You can kind of tweak it a little bit to kind of get it there, but not something that's easy. Then we have open, which is the default for these projects. And so if you do open, then basically anybody can do anything. You can view it, you can edit it, you can delete stuff, you can do whatever permission you have, right? So you want to be very careful here, folks, because I think Tuesday we had a conversation about what happens when you bring on contractors to your company, right? Well, in your company managed projects, you can tweak your permission schemes to kind of lock things up, do it in one permission scheme, apply it to a lot of projects, and lock up all your company managed projects in one suite, right? But if you have team managed projects and they're all open, then your only option to hide the project is to make it private. Because remember, limited will also have it exposed. So limited projects are still viewable by end users. So the only way to hide the project is to make it private. But you basically have broken Jira for everybody that's not explicitly in that people section. So you're gonna have to balance your requirements here. Tricky, right, Rodney?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So be very, very careful. This one's usually like, you got to determine if the juice is worth the squeeze on this one. Not on this one, but on what we're just talking about here, because again, it's really only a use case when you have to bring somebody on to your Jira who's not an employee, and then you don't want them to see everything, because naturally Jira is very collaborative in nature, so things are very open. So you will have to make a very hard decision, and you have to lock things up. And unfortunately, your team managed projects, I think, are going to fall victims, are greater victim, if I were to speak English correctly. Anything you want to add, Rodney?
I mean, this is one of a whole host of reasons why Jira admins on the whole don't like team managed projects. Some of it is control issues, and Jira admins by nature have control issues. Not going to deny that. Tell me I'm lying, Alex.
Nope, no, you're preaching to the
But
choir
a
here.
lot of it is team managed projects do not scale. And it's situations like this where you have to go in and make changes, and you cannot make changes, blanket changes across all of them. You have to go each one individually, and it just gets to be a nightmare because there are so many scenarios, not just the adding a contractor, but there are so many scenarios where you'll need to make a company-wide change.
Yep. All right, folks. So again, be very careful, because my 2 cents, my opinion, the amount of headache that you're gonna create for yourself to lock things up, it's cheaper. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it's cheaper to pay for external share for Jira than it is to lock things up. Much cheaper. Just trust me on that one. It is cheaper.
If you really need to, break your salary down to an hourly rate, figure out how many hours it would take you to adjust all these projects and go, here, we could spend this in my hours doing this, or we could spend it on this one app, which is only this much per year.
Yeah,
And
and then
I
whatever
guarantee
number
you, one number will be smaller.
Yeah, and when you estimate it, double your estimate because you will forget people. People, especially when you have open projects, there's a lot of people that take it for granted that they can just access Jira projects. And the moment you move that thing to private, people are going to come out of the woodwork and you're going to be like, who the heck are you? So you're going to miss people that weren't on your like approved list that should get access, which also then also budget time because you now need to go figure out who should get access to the projects. And so it's just a time-consuming event. You will spend a drastically much more time figuring it all out and applying the permission and fixing the mistakes because mistakes will be made than you will just paying the $20 to get external share for Jira. Much easier. Okay, not sponsored, but it's Warside Dynamics, right?
It is Warside Dynamic, and though it's not sponsored, let's talk because we would absolutely love to support this app.
Yep. All right. So control access to work items with work restrictions. So in software and business projects, you can add work restrictions to work types. Work restrictions control which projects roles can view newly created work items of that type. For example, you can restrict custom security vulnerability work type to only a security engineer role that can view this. Folks, I would tell you be very careful when you go down this route, but I'm going to show you how this works. You're going to go to your project settings. These are for team managed projects. For company managed projects, it's a whole scheme of issue level security or work item level security, much more complex, much more harder. There's screens that have to be involved. There's permissions that need to be involved. There's the actual creation of the work item restriction. And then you have to be in whatever groups you're going to restrict it to, because if you're the admin and you're not in those groups, then you don't see anything. So there's a bunch of nuances over there. But on team manage, it's as simple as 5 steps. So let's walk you through that. So you're going to go to project settings, click on your work type, add a restriction, and then put the lock. So let's see. So I'm in a team managed business project. I'm going to go to my work types. You're going to pick a work type. Let's go with defect. And
you are getting entirely too used to calling them work type and all that. I'm still struggling with issue types.
I'm an administrator, so why can't I do this? Oh, Atlassian.
Are you a project administrator, though?
I am. That's what I just confirmed. Select the work time. At the top of the page, there's a lock icon. Somebody yell at me if you see the lock icon.
This may have been a victim of the UI reorg.
Maybe. Yeah, let's go to my other one. See if it has it in there.
I mean, we've seen it before because we looked at this when we were doing our ACP-120.
Yeah, no. There's the lock. Okay, so for some reason it's not on my other one. You click on this lock. And of course, you got to be on the paid version. And then you go through the steps. So again, I would say, though, just as a caution, just as a word to the wise, exercise this carefully. Don't just hand these restrictions out. Like, there should be a very good business reason for why you would lock something up. A very good one. And because I said so is not a good business reason. All right. Emilio is a project admin for a team managed service project. He wants a custom manager role to be able to edit requests and add customer comments. Okay. How would he configure this role? The team managed project. He wants a custom manager role. He wants a. I don't think it's B. Because that. So I'm going to go positive elimination because I don't understand the question nor the answers here. So it's definitely not B. So now I got a 50-50 shot of getting this right. We're going to update the permissions or update the restrictions. He wants the custom to be able to edit requests. Okay, so I don't think it's C either, because this based on this upper part is so you can see it. It doesn't talk about being able to comment or anything like that. So I'm going to go with permissions on this one. Whew, I was struggling with that one. All right. Mariana is a project admin for a team managed business project. She wants users in her Jira site to be able to view her project's work but not create them. So that's going to be limited. And that's correct. All right. Hey, I earned another badge. Okay. So I think, Ronnie, I think this brings us to a good stopping point here, especially since I got to skedoodle and go travel.
Yep.
We're going to end a little early here, folks. Sorry about that, but I don't feel comfortable starting a whole new section. And also I got to go catch a plane. So we'll pick it back up on Tuesday next week. And I think it's going to be probably wise to see where we're at with respect to all the sections for the ACP 620, and make sure that we covered everything, at least in module 1, and then we'll go from there.
Correct.
All right, folks, again, thank you for being here. Special shout out to Revyz for making this episode possible. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit that subscribe button right now. We're trying to get to 2,000 subscribers. We're almost there, and we can only get there if you hit that subscribe button. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Help Giovanni feel better about his life.
Because apparently this is the only channel I have, if you ask Valerie.
Help Valerie feel better about her life by helping us get to 2,000 subscribers, because Dr. Valerie, she's watching our metrics like a hawk. And so make sure you're smashing that subscribe button. All right, folks. See you all on Tuesday.
See you Tuesday.